Dr. Greg Shirley II serves as the Associate Director for Employer Relations, Technology, and Operations at the Texas Women's University Career Connection Center. Dr. Shirley possesses 12 years of relevant experience in higher education, specifically in student affairs and career development. He received his Doctor of Education in Educational Administration, emphasis in curriculum supervision and instruction, as well as his Master of Science in Higher Education Administration from Texas A&M University Commerce and his Bachelor of Science in Secondary Education from Paul Quinn College. Greg's top 5 Strengths Finder results are woo, input, connectedness, positivity, and communication. So making connections and building relationships are nothing new to him. Greg's favorite quote is from Charles Swindoll, and it reads, "We cannot change the inevitable. The only thing we can do is play on the string we have, and that is our attitude. I'm convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% of how I react to it. And so it is with you. We are in charge of our attitudes." Good afternoon, Greg. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Bethany. I am doing so well. Thank you so much for including me in the pantheon of Lion Talk attendees.
Yeah.
Vincent set the tone. I'm here to enhance it.
Very good. Yes, absolutely. You are our season 2 kickoff speaker, and we are thrilled to have you. We appreciate you joining us, and I'm so excited. I know we've been talking about doing this for a long time, so it's fun to get together and impart some of your wisdom on our students and alumni. So again, just thank you for being here. So every episode of LIONTalks starts out with the same question. So I'm going to ask you the same question that I ask everybody, and we'll take it from there. So what was your favorite part about your time at A&M Commerce?
There's so many. I feel like the best time that I had was, if we were to look at this from a longitudinal study perspective, seeing, and you know this, Bethany, you see these students come in 17, 18, 19, freshmen, first generation, first time college attendees, and then to see that progression 3, 4, 5, 6 years later, to see them in a cap and gown, walking commencement, and you still remember, you have them frozen in time, seeing them on the second floor of the student center at orientation, or seeing them in a class presentation, or teaching them as their freshman success instructor, and to see the growth, the good and the bad, and you just have to stop in awe. And oftentimes I've said, and you and I've had this conversation, I don't want kids. I've never had a desire to have children, but I get that fulfillment seeing them make those accomplishments and make those strides and go out and be amazing people. And Mr. Feeney from Boy Meets World said it best on the series finale, go out and do good. And Corey said, don't you mean do well? He said, no, do good. And we're seeing a majority of these students who are no longer students, who are no longer babies, doing well, but also doing good. To add to that, seeing the ones that said they would never work in higher education, and look at where they're at now. Oh, I'll never work in higher education. I'll never do. Oh, okay. All right. Look at you now.
They always come back.
You always come back.
It's hard to get away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is so true. I mean, it's been interesting this year because a lot of students I've met for the first time virtually. We did virtual orientation, and it's really, I think it's been cool still being able to build that relationship. But I have missed that, see that like wide-eyed look of freshmen, coming to your booth at an orientation, or, just happening to wander by your office, and they're clearly lost, and you can guide them to, whatever building they're looking for. It is sort of like a parental role. You still see them sometimes as that, and I love when we get to see it, particularly in what we do with career services, is being able to see them not only cross that stage, but to go to that first day of their job, or, ask for help with that, and come back, and when they're like a mentor to a student because they're in that role. I love seeing that. It all comes full circle. So how do you think that your time in your graduate program at A&M Commerce has helped shape your present?
I will say yes, however, not for the reasons that perhaps a lot of people may assume. And so working in a career center, working in career development, and going through a more traditional yet non-traditional, if that makes sense, higher education program, because the higher ed program at Commerce isn't heavy on theory. And you know, us higher ed folks, we love us some theory. It's different when you're working in a career center because none of that theory makes sense. All the theory is thrown out the window. Even when you think of career counseling theories from a traditional counseling program that's KCREP accredited and things like that, when you're in the thick of it, students do not care whether you are Aston or Chickering or whatever. In many cases, it's a triage situation and a triage moment. Um, so what I appreciate with my graduate programs, both my master's and my doctorate, besides giving me the credentials that I'm looking at on my wall right now in my office, to do what it is that I have, I'll be honest with you, that I ran from when I was in graduate school because I said I would never work in a career center because I thought it was boring and dull and I didn't know what people were doing. Now I'm about to give a webinar about diversity in career development and recruitment this week or next week or whatever. But I appreciate the opportunity to kind of dispel the myths that some of our other colleagues who work in other functional areas in higher education have about the importance of theory and the importance of a career center, because I think that people assume that ours is a role that anybody can do, which from a career champion perspective, yes, we want you to have those conversations because you're organically having those conversations with your students anyway in orientation, in fraternity and sorority life, in campus recreation. However, we are the subject matter experts.
Mm-hmm.
You can be that catalyst and that spark. You may even be able to be that change agent, but as a subject matter expert, let me show you why it's more than just a resume and a mock interview. And let me show you that there's more than one way to make a resume.
Yeah.
And more than one way to conduct an interview. And then let's add to the layers of if you're a Black, Indigenous person of color, or you're a woman, or you're a veteran, or you're an international student, or you're a non-traditional student and you're older. Those layers, everybody's not going to be able to identify those. And that, to a certain extent, is where theory can come into play. However, so many theories were based on white men that it doesn't apply to everybody else. And so I appreciate my program for giving me the ability to talk the jargon, but then okay, let's take it out of theory and let's put it into practicality.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely plays a huge role into what you do. And I think, you know, the career landscape is ever changing. And I don't think that we can research it fast enough. I don't think we can apply theory fast enough because every student situation is so different. And every job search is so different. Even for one student, you could have 4 totally different job search pathways as one student. One job search could be an interview, you get an offer. The other one could be 6 interviews, 3 of them pre-recorded, and you know, a behavioral test. I mean,
a group interview.
Yeah, exactly.
And you don't even know it's a group interview. You're just waiting in the lobby having a conversation.
Yeah, you're like, what just happened?
Yeah.
I one time I interviewed for an internship at Southwest Airlines, and I can say with certainty it is the only interview that I have ever fully bombed. It was horrible. I was not prepared to walk into a group setting, have to stand up and answer one question, which ended up being the only question in front of a group of people. And I froze and I couldn't, to save my life, define public relations, which was my major.
Okay. Well, at least you know it now. Yeah. However, so many years later.
Yes, so many years later. I still wish I had gotten that summer internship, but that summer I worked for Enterprise and it ended up being an awesome experience. And I still use my skills I learned there today. So it all worked out how it should. But you're so right. There are so many different directions that it could take, and that is so important for people to know. And we always want career champions, but this is our lives, and we spend our lives learning about, job search strategy, and we want to dispel that information. So that's really great. So my next question is this, and it's kind of a at the heartstrings question. So brace for impact. So tell me about a time when you maybe faced some adversity or an unexpected challenge, and how did you manage that, and how is it, what you experienced impacted you going forward?
Getting a degree when you lose a parent, or losing a parent as you're obtaining a degree.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can remember my mother passed away in 2012, Halloween Day. And I was a year away from getting my doctorate degree. And I can remember the year before that, I finished my comprehensive examinations in fall of 2011. And for whatever reason, Bethany, I just acted a fool all of 2012. Like, I didn't do any writing, I didn't do any research. I just chilled. And so I can remember the summer of 2012, my mother getting sick, and it was rapid, it was quick. And we did not know what was wrong with her. She had always been, a fairly healthy person. She worked as a nurse. She would go to the mall with the other old ladies and walk at like 6, 7 in the morning to get her
I'm a
mouth.
mall walker. I did not know that your mother was a mall walker.
She was a walker. She was a walker. She, didn't smoke. She didn't drink alcohol. She had one too many Coca-Colas, I think, on a regular basis. I mean, she wasn't the healthiest eater. She had a big sweet tooth, which is where I get it now. And so it was very odd to see her sick and to see her decline so rapidly.
Yeah.
And so to have that happen and to realize that she was not going to be there to see me walk. And then I had the guilt of, what if I hadn't fooled around for an entire year?
Yeah.
What if I would have got on the stick in January to like October or November, or January to May, done what I needed to do to write my dissertation, defend my proposal, do my final defense, graduate. And that's something that I sit with. Like, I've sat with it for 8 going on 9 years. However, I know she was there.
Yeah.
As a higher power. And so, yeah, it's one of those things, because you've experienced that. It's hard. It's tough. And the natural progression of things. Parents are supposed to perceive their children, but it's never easy. And my twin brother says this all the time. Our mother didn't prepare us for life without her.
Yeah.
And so to go through that was really traumatic. What I can say that I relied upon is, because I'm the type of person, I love to work out. I actually, right before you and I started, I was out walking 3 miles. I still have all my leg weights, my 5-pound leg weights. And, I can remember a friend of mine at the time, he saw that I wasn't going to the Moores Recreation Center, shout out to the MRC. And he was like, get up, come on, let's go. And he would go with me like every day, a couple of weeks after I had come back to work and we had laid my mother to rest and things like that. And he would motivate me to work out, and I slowly got back into it. And so I can honestly say that if I didn't have not just his motivation, and we're still friends to this day, if I didn't have his motivation, but if I also didn't have that outlet, then I think I would have been in a much darker place for a lot longer.
Yeah, I think, you talked about theory earlier. As theorists, we know the stages of grief, and we know how they are supposed to impact us, what the books say. But I think when you experience something of that magnitude, of that large loss in such a quick fashion, like we, unfortunately both did, um, it really impacts you, and you really just see everything differently after that. I don't know about if that's how you feel, but I see the world a little differently. And I mean, for the good. There's, I live life to its fullest, because you never know what day is your last. And there's never a day. I mean, my husband gets up at the crack of freaking dawn to go to work, but there's never a day that he leaves the house that I don't make sure that I say, I love you. So I know that every day I've said that, because when my dad passed away, I couldn't remember for weeks. Like, I saw him the day before. Like, was I too rushed in my car? Like, I questioned. You sit with everybody questions, but that's a phase of grief, right? So, I sit with that. I question, as I remember being really hungry the last time I saw him, and being like, he was so chatty. And I was like, my God, can we go? I am starving.
Yeah.
Because keeping my daughter for the weekend, and Mama needed a night away. I was going to a U2 concert. Like, I had things to do. And so everybody has those moments. And I think how we respond to it and how we incorporate what our loved ones would have wanted into our life. And it's not like living our life for them, but like thinking about how they might see us, or, how we can, kind of like live like them, or remind people about them. I know for me, and I think for you too, I've finally gotten to a point where I can talk about it for a long time. I couldn't even say the words, my dad died. So I think that's something that's super important to talk about, is when you face those adversity, is to find people who can pick you up, find those people who are going to just let you be in your sadness if that's what you need. But also to say, okay, what can we do to get back on the horse? Can we get back to the MRC? What's going to make us, what are our next steps here? So I didn't ask that question for us to get sappy or anything, but I think it's so important. And adversity that you face in your life really plays a role into who you are and where you go in your career, and your what you do with your life and how you live your life from day to day. So I appreciate your candidness and openness. Let's sort of switch gears here. We've talked a lot about your experience in higher ed, and things are crazy right now with COVID and how everything is changing, and people are really, with student loan crisis and this and that, people are really reevaluating their higher ed experience. So what advice would you give to a student who's maybe considering either going into a grad program or putting it off for a year, or maybe considering taking a gap year before they go into an undergrad program? What advice, if you had a captive audience, what advice do you think you would share with them?
Do what feels right for you. I think for so many of us, we're so used to what our parents put on us or what our peers have instilled on us. And we have a keeping up with the Joneses mentality that, the saying is, the grass may be green on the other side, but the water bill is probably higher. And so we see these things from the outside. And I liken this, my brother and I, because for those that don't know, I have a twin brother that's also affiliated in a fraternity. Bethany is in a sorority. I'm in a fraternity. And Bethany, you can understand this. From the outside looking in, people don't understand it. But from the inside looking out, you can't explain it unless you're in it. And that's what I feel like this time is for everybody. Everybody is on the outside looking in on everyone else's life. And we're all on the inside looking out, trying to explain and articulate what we're feeling. However, it's a challenge. Even with me and my twin brother, we both work in higher education. We're roommates, but there are things that happen in each other's lives that neither of us can really understand nor explain. And so if I were still meeting with students, if I were still meeting with alumni and they were asking me these questions, that would literally be the top of mind. First thing that comes to mind, you have to practice self-care, whatever it is you're doing. Even as I have this conversation with you, I'm holding my zodiac crystals because they keep me from having stress and just peace and calm, and whatever you need, that's what you need. If you feel like you have the tenacity to keep up and do a graduate program, great. If you feel like it's going to help take your mind off everything else that's going on, great. Make sure you pick the right graduate program for you. don't go off and, this is going to upset some people. Don't go off and get a master's degree in liberal studies. And you're like in accounting or finance, or because I'm going to ask, what are you going to do with that, baby? Precious baby, precious Lord. If you want to take a gap year and just figure stuff out, do it. However, make sure that whatever you're doing, you don't get caught up in like the circling and the spiraling of that and be stuck in a holding pattern. And I think for so many of us, we catastrophize and we end up circling and we just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. And it's really hard to get out of that. And so as long as whatever your plan is, whether it's the gap year, whether it's you taking a break, whether it's you going to graduate school, just having a plan of what you're going to be doing after that, I think is as important. So that's what I would advise for anybody.
Yeah, yes. I would definitely agree with that. And I would tack on something you said that's really important about if you're going into a degree program, make sure you know why you're going into said degree program. Don't just, get, a certificate just because it seemed like the right thing to do last Tuesday. Know how it's going to benefit you and weigh that cost benefit analysis here is real important, because if it's going to cost you several $1,000s to get this certificate or this, additional degree, is that long-term? Is that going to increase your salary? Is that going to increase your mental health? Is that going to increase your well-being, your marketability in a job search? What's the reason for doing it? Are you doing it just because you want to be a lifelong learner? If so, that's great. But if you're doing it because you think it's going to get you a better job, make sure you're getting the right degree for the right jobs that you do your research. And your local career center, located in Library 225, can help you figure that out. Shameless plug. Okay, that's good. I like that answer. So, you talked a lot about the things that you would suggest that people do. Looking back on your higher ed experience, as if you could go back and do it again, is there anything you would change that maybe students might want to take into consideration as they're starting out on their journey?
I'm sure there are things. There are things. I really think that it goes back to, this is what I would change. I would be more intentional about what I majored in undergrad. And I tell this story all the time to people. You may have heard this story already, but if not, it's fine because I'm about to tell it. I remember in high school, I told my mother I wanted to be a high school history teacher. My mother looked me dead in my eyes and said, "You're not going to make any money doing that. You need to major in business and computers." And I'm like, at 17, 18, I'm like, well, what's business and computers? Ladies and gentlemen, management information systems, that's business and computers. I finally figured it out. And so I went to school and I declared a major in management and a minor in computer information systems. And I remember I was chugging along in the classes, Bethany. I was doing very well until I got to trigonometry. And I was like, I hate this. I despise this. And I felt the same way about accounting, but I could do it.
Right.
But you know what? If I can do it, and at the time I didn't have, like many of our students now, I didn't know that I had the right to love what I did. I didn't know that I had the right to have a career and not a job, because a job is an acronym for being just over broke. Put that on a canvas too. So I barely passed trigonometry with a C. I think the teacher felt bad for me. Then I got to calculus. And eventually in the middle of the semester, Bethany, I stopped going to class because I was just like, I skipped class. And that was the first time that I had ever done that in my academic career. And so my twin brother was going through kind of the same situation with a different major. So we ended up switching our majors to secondary education and didn't tell our mother. And so she didn't really find out until we graduated from college. Yeah.
What?
Mm-hmm. She thought she was getting two business majors.
As a mother, my heart. hurts to hear.
However, because we switched majors, we got scholarships and she didn't have to pay for college anymore.
Okay, as a mother, that warms my heart. Back correct.
And so what I tell students all the time is that was 2 years of me in a program that delayed my graduation by 2 years. I was supposed to graduate with my bachelor's degree in 2003. I graduated with my bachelor's degree in 2005. I also ended up owing 2 additional years of student loans. That's what I tell people, because that first 2 years I didn't have that scholarship.
Yeah.
So I had loans, and I'm still paying on that $6,000 loan to this day. Minimum payments. They are not covered under this loan forgiveness plan that President Joe Biden has incorporated. But you know what? Fed Loan Services, you'll see me in September. Well, now, you better talk to Joseph Robert Biden Jr. about that. And so what I tell them is really spend the time thinking about what makes you happy. Really spend the time thinking about what it is you don't want to do as much as what you do want to do. Because I work in a career center partly because I don't want students to end up like me, owing 2 years on student loans that they don't have to owe, graduating 2 years later, if they could help it. Now, of course, there are sometimes extenuating circumstances and things happen. And as long as you get the degree, that's what matters. However, for me, 39-year-old, about to be 40-year-old Greg next week, looks back at like 17, 18-year-old Greg, and I'm like, if I would have only had somebody to tell me the things that I instill in young people now, I would not have been so far down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, I think you really nailed something there in the job versus career. I think oftentimes, we do what we think our parents want us to do. We don't really look at like where our strengths meet our natural abilities. And we're like, I am good at computer programming, but I didn't want to be a computer science major because I didn't want to be a heads down coder for the rest of my life. And at that time, back in our day, as I like to say, which I don't feel was that long ago, but when I look at the calendar, tell me otherwise. I have an impending high school reunion coming up, which kind of changes my soul when I think about it.
Every day I wake up and my left knee reminds me that I am.
Yes.
And my lower back.
But I think it's so important because you can change your major 100 times and it's fine, but you really want to make sure that you capitalize on that academic opportunity and take those courses that are going to ultimately benefit you in your career. I mean, I remember I took some classes that I was just trying to get some credits and I didn't even really care about them, but the classes that I took that were major relevant, some of that I still use today. Like I took a class about politics and the mass media that I could have predicted all this crazy social media-ness coming, I'm not even gonna say the number out loud, but many years ago, because of that class. And so really looking at those classes you take and not just trying to check boxes and really maximize the opportunity. You're paying for it. Learn as much as you can while you're here. Even though sometimes there might be the easier way out to, in my case, take self-paced astronomy instead of a science.
Wait, what is self-paced astronomy?
That is how a journalism major gets a science credit. That is how we do it.
How did they let you take self-paced astronomy?
It was like an online class before an online class really existed. And you had this book and you studied chapter by chapter and you would go take a chapter test in this laboratory. And at the end, and then you had to go to a couple of live sessions where you looked at, the Big Dipper, I guess. Clearly, I was a wonderful student in that class. It's an amazing program, and I'm sure I would have learned a lot had I put my full effort forth. But I am not an astronomer to this day. I got an app, though. There's an app for that.
Oh, yeah, the CoStar app? Yeah, I use the CoStar app. For astrology, not astronomy. But.
Yeah, it's a little different. But if I looking back, maybe it would have been more beneficial to me to take a biology or a chemistry so that when my kid Is it one of those classes about like, I don't know, mom's out, dad, what do you got?
What you got? Because I don't know, baby. I don't know.
Chris spent 3 years as a chemical engineering major before he changed to business. So he's in charge of science. I am not when that day comes. So, but no, I think all jokes aside, I think you're onto something. It's never too early to think about what you're going to do at the end of college and to set up that plan. It doesn't mean everything has to be rigid and you take the fun out of it. You want to take self-paced astronomy, take self-paced astronomy, but also make sure and think about the classes you're taking and how they can ultimately contribute to your success in the real world when it's all said and done. So it's great advice. So when we talk about the job search, this is sort of your bread and butter. So we're gonna get all the advice you got. You're here for it. Okay. So what advice would you give to students about advocating for themselves? You touched on this a little bit earlier. Every student has a different story. Everybody in a job search process has a different story and a different background from which they're coming. How would you talk to students about advocating for themselves in the job search process?
So for me, and Bethany, you know this, I'm going to pull from the core competencies from NACE, and I know that they're redoing them. One of them is career management. And so what falls under career management for me is advocacy for self. And so I really feel like where we as career development professionals can really help you all as students and even as alumni is to help you find your voice. And not only help you find your voice, but how to most effectively articulate that. What I will say is that's not going to be handled in one session. It's not. It's not going to be one 30-minute, 45-minute, 60-minute session. Just as you are a layered person, your voice is going to be layered. And you need to, once again, identify what you don't love as much as what you do. Donald Ashton, I believe his name is, came up with the 4 dynamic tensions of career development: job, location, salary, effort. What's important to you as a young professional? When we were younger, and I feel like I can speak for Bethany, we only cared about how much money you were paying me and what my vacation time looked like. But now that we're older, what effort do I have to put into this job? And if I'm passionate about this job, I want to make sure that I'm exerting as much effort as possible because this is my passion. Literally, the career that you do, ladies and gentlemen, is an extension of who you are as a person. You spend more time at your job than you do at home. You spend more time with your coworkers back when the world was open, and even now, than you may with your own family. And so you have to literally wake up and love what you're doing in order to be that effective person. Because if you're not going to be satisfied with your work, and your work environment is going to be able to tell that you're not satisfied, and they will not be satisfied with you. And so if you're looking to advocate for yourself, experiential education, experiential opportunities, job shadowing, informational interviewing, internships, all of those things are great examples of what you can engage in that's low impact. And what I mean by low impact, if you hate it, it's not going to be the end of the world. You're not going to totally implode your career opportunities.
Right.
For you to go in and say, you know what, let me take the rose-colored glasses off and let me really see and let me understand. I did student teaching. I hated working in a classroom. I'm looking at my degree now, Bachelor of Science in Secondary Education from Paul Quinn College. It was in my bio. Am I working at a high school teaching history? I am not. I had a young lady when I worked at Commerce and we did Lion Job Shadow. She thought she wanted to, literally her words were, I want to do CSI. This was back when CSI was really popular. And so we put her with the Dallas County Medical Examiner's Office. She threw up and she passed out. She's an accountant now. She's a forensic accountant, but she's an accountant. If you don't engage in those opportunities and you just kind of go in cold turkey, you're going to be stuck in an opportunity that is going to, I don't mean to sound extreme, it's going to kill you. And so literally take your time, take that 3, 4, 5 years, visit with your career coach or your career consultant on a regular basis and have this conversation. We as career development and career center professionals, we look at things through an objective lens. You come in, we have a horse in this race because we want to see you succeed. However, we don't have a horse in this race to the degree that we're like your friends, your significant other, your parents are like, you have to do this. This is what you need to do. Bethany, don't do that with your children. And so by then, you'll have at least a roadmap or an idea. And a lot of people think that they have to know what it is that they love and what their passion is, like right out the gate. What I tell people, and I've said it in this conversation, start with what you don't like. We know what we don't like well before we know what we do like.
Yeah.
So that would be my advice. I don't know if I answered your question.
You totally did answer my question. And I think you said something really interesting about what you don't like versus what you like. And I think a lot of times we look at like, oh, well, you know, I like helping people. And we look at it in these generic terms, but we really need to get down to the nitty gritty of, well, do you like helping people in a sense that like you want to help them find the right resources, or like you want to fix their broken leg? We need to really look at it from in that, like in a more detailed fashion. Something too that I do with people in this design your life exercises that we do is we talk about our work view and our world view. We'll break into groups of 3 and we'll read out loud our work view, which is, you know, what we want to get out of work, how we see work, why we work, what we want to take home from that. And our worldview is how we see the world, how we want to impact the world, that kind of thing. And you have a student read that out loud, and then the other people tell them, you know, you really lit up when you talked about data analytics or whatever it was you were talking about.
You need those people, but it ain't me.
I mean, that's my color-coded Excel spreadsheet. I get really excited. I get really excited about like operational efficiency, which is not something that a lot of people get really excited about. But, you know, making processes smoother and that kind of thing. Like I could talk about how to, you know, get paper out of an office and make an efficient process all day long, but that bores most people to tears.
I am most people.
Oh, hush. Nobody's bored when their forms are all put online and everything is super efficient.
And I appreciate you for that. You and Jacob, I appreciate you and Jacob for that. And if you ever need me to speak to a crowd of 300 people without cue cards or a script, I'm your man.
Oh, I know. That's why you're on the podcast. You know, it's just, I think it's, you know, it's important because you have other people. When we talk about these things, you write them out and somebody says, did you know that you get that excited about operational efficiency? I didn't really always know that it's something I got excited about. Like, I didn't know that when I graduated from college or my first job out of school, but there's the things that you churn and you learn as you go along. And I think it's so important to talk those out with a career coach or consultant. Career coach is available in Library 225, you know. What would you say is the biggest mistake you see people make in the job search process?
They don't take it seriously and they feel like it's linear. Mm-hmm. By not taking it seriously, they will think of any excuse or any reason, and this is also a shameless plug, to not speak to somebody. They think that they have it all. They have all the answers. They think they know all of the solutions to their own problems. If that were the case, there wouldn't be a such thing as therapists, and there wouldn't be a such thing as religious advisors, and there wouldn't be a such thing as career consultants or career coaches or career counselors. You're putting much more on yourself than you need to, because there are people out here that are willing to help you for free. You're paying for it out your student services fees. You can still utilize these services in many cases for free as an alum. And so one day I may just go ahead and utilize the Career Center at A&M Commerce for free, just because.
HireLion.com at TABC HireLion 903-468-3223 anytime.
Yep, Bethany, I'll just come to your office and I'll just sit like Robert Dodson used to do. I don't know why I'm here.
We got ceilings now, so we can talk whenever we want.
But yes, definitely utilize the services and start having the conversation sooner rather than later. And also realize that people don't realize that in many cases their career development is cyclical. It's not linear. You're always revisiting the same steps over and over and over again. And that's not, that's not someone's fault. We've been taught you go to high school, you go to college, you get a degree, you get a career, you work that same career for 20 years, then you retire. That's what my mother thought. My mother was like, you better get this job, you better keep it. Like the woman, like the mama in Soul, benefits, full benefits. But the cyclical component of it is you're gonna get married, you're gonna move, you're gonna get divorced. Life will happen, and you need to change with the tide that life has. Also, exploring how you can still find satisfaction even if you don't have that satisfaction necessarily in your career. And so what I see with a lot of first gen students is, yes, they want to help people, but they're either a single parent or they're taking care of their family. So they need a role that's going to be financially beneficial. So they may not be able to have that passion in their role because it's paying the bills and then some. So what can you do outside of your 8 to 5 Monday through Friday that's going to refill your bucket?
Yes.
Is that volunteering? Is that philanthropy? Is that something? Because then you're going to come back with your bucket refilled. My day-to-day doesn't deal with diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is a passion that I have. It has subtle nuances to it, but it's not knee-deep into it. However, I'm engaged in things outside of my role that fill that bucket, and then I'm able to come back and be a much more productive contributing member of my team. So really identify those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally echo everything you just said. I think it's so important to find what you need to fill your bucket, but you also have to pay rent, and you also have to, pay your car payment. And eventually we're going to have to start paying back student loans. And
Dr. Johnson Ronald and Biden Jr. about that, because that's brought me now at least till September. At least until September.
Those things come due. I've been referring students recently who are just sort of uncertain recently to a website called texasrealitycheck.org, and it's based on where you might live. You can, input Dallas. I want to live in a studio apartment. I want to have 3 kids. I don't know about 3 kids in a studio apartment, but I want to have a fancy budget for this car. I want to do that. And it tells you, okay, you want to do all these things. You need to make $1 million a year or whatever it is. And it kind of gets you to come back, do a reality check and figure out, okay, what do I really need out of my career? And what am I looking at? What are my options? Things that I'm good at, but also things that, like you said, fill your bucket. Because I think it goes back to that. Do I want, just over broke, or do I want something that is going to fulfill me when I, it's going to, do I want to get out of bed in the morning and go to work? And not everybody has a job that they wake up and they're like, oh, can't wait to go to the widget factory today or whatever it is. And if you have a job that pays the bills at the widget factory, I just made that up clearly. And it does, it fills that need for you. That's great. But we so often see that people are missing that component. So if we can get people to start thinking, students can start thinking about that early on, I think it's incredibly beneficial to their long-term success, to you, the listeners' long-term success, I guess I should say. Yeah. So you talked about, life changes and this kind of thing. And I kind of like to ask people this question. It's a part of some of the Design Your Life Odyssey planning work I do with students. If you woke up tomorrow and, career services was no longer a thing, we've decided that people can just figure it out on their own, no more departments. What do you think it is that you would do? What would you do instead if, you woke up tomorrow and had to find a new job or a new career path?
I would be a plant-based and fitness influencer.
Okay.
I would.
All right.
I have lost 30 pounds since July. And I love Instagram and all things social media. Bethany knows this. And the interesting thing about it is random people, strangers will tell me how motivating I am, how inspiring I am, how they're seeing me and it makes them want to get up off the couch, or they'll ask me questions about what is it that you eat? What's the secret? What's this? What's that? And I don't have I'm like, this is what you do. This is literally what you do. And anybody can do it. People are like, well, how much do you charge? I'm like, I'm not going to charge you because there's no secret. I don't have a secret to get. Everything is on YouTube. Literally. Calorie restriction, intermittent fasting, get moving, plant-based lifestyle. That's it. And give yourself grace, patience, dedication. Dedication kicks in where motivation is lacking. And so knowing that and knowing that there are so many people who will have a much better overall health outlook if they just moved more and made subtle changes in what they were eating, particularly people of color and marginalized populations, because COVID has hit Black and brown people hard. Mm-hmm. COVID has hit, whether some people want to believe it or not, rural people hard. And I'm just leave that at that. A lot of it though has to do with what we put in our bodies and what we don't put in our bodies and the sedentary lifestyle that we have. Food can either be poison or it can be powerful. You choose 3 times a day what you're going to put into your body. And I'm not here to preach or proselytize anybody, but that would be what I would do. And I would try to help people live a better life for not only themselves, but for others. Because if you have friends, if you have family, my life is not necessarily my own. If I claim to love people, then that means that I have a responsibility to be in their life for as long as I possibly can. And I really feel like if we would have had the knowledge and if we would have had the education on nutrition and health that we have now, that we had back in 2010, 2011, 2012, I feel like that my mother would have had a better quality of life and she would have been around longer because she ate a lot of the cheeses and the meats and the sweets. She walked. Once again, she walked, but there were just things like looking back, Bethany, now that I'm better knowledge, we shouldn't have been eating that. We should not have been doing those things. So that's what I would do.
This has been so fun. I just have one more question for you. So if our listeners could leave this podcast with just remembering just one thing about your LIONTalks, other than how eating a plant-based diet is good for the soul and the mind and the body. Obviously, that's number one. And the grass may be greener on the other side, but the water
bill might be high.
Yeah, that's definitely a Motivational Monday quote in the come into a social media post near you. Anyway, if they could leave this podcast and remember just one thing about your LIONTalk, what would you want it to be?
I mean, for lack of a better word, you know what? It could always be worse. It could always be worse. You always need to have grace and patience with yourself. You are human. And there's the saying, to err is human, to forgive is divine. We have a hard time forgiving ourselves for certain behaviors and actions and stuff like that. But in the world that we live in, which is overloaded with information constantly, we have no choice but to be stressed. And so if you could just take time for yourself and just, as cliche as this sounds, love yourself, give yourself the grace and patience that you give someone else, but then also give it to that stranger, give it to that janitorial staff, give it to that host or hostess or that server. Because I hate people that are rude to wait staff, and I hate people who are rude to like janitorial staff. Like I've ended.
I firmly believe that everyone at some point in their life should work as a server or in the restaurant industry of some sort. Yes. You'll never low tip again after you have worked in the restaurant industry.
Ever. Like the lowest tip I will give is 18%. I always tip 20.
If it's bad, I'll do 15. If it's like bad, but I still do 15. But 9 times out of 10, it's like 20 to 25.
Yes. And so that would be my parting words. I'm just be kind to yourself. please, whatever that looks like, whether it's getting more rest, eating better, exercising, journaling, spending time outside, just be kind to yourself because you are needed. You may not feel like you are, but somebody needs the gift that you have and who you are.
I think that is such great, specifically job search advice as well. The job search process can be so draining and so heartbreaking. Honestly, you get to a certain round of an interview, you see yourself in that role. You see yourself going to that office, working in that, and then you don't get that job. You have to come back from that. And that's a hard place to be. And so give yourself grace, and the right opportunity is out there and will come along. And I'm a firm believer that things happen in the way they are meant to happen. And, you will not get a job, and 5 years later, you will look back and say, thank God I didn't get that job. Or, you'll realize that that's not me. That's not what I wanted. That's what I thought I needed at the time. But what I actually needed was around the corner. So, well, Greg, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. The LIONTalks staff, so appreciate you. And thank you so much, seriously, from the bottom of my heart, for kicking off season 2 for LIONTalks, and for just being a great, friend and coworker that I never actually worked with. And
that is our running joke, y'all. We have never worked together, but we act like we work together.
Yes, we could.
And people are like, how long did you and Bethany work together? We never have. Ever. 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 But that's okay. Quiet coyote. Quiet coyote.
Well, again, thank you for joining us today. And this has been season 2, episode 1 of LIONTalks. And we hope you will check out our next episode coming soon to a podcast near you.